All right, all right. So, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 48 here of Live Feature Rant. Today we have Porosorsus and Diggs on joining us for the show. You might have noticed it's not actually the four-way format. I've kind of switched things up, and we just have this kind of modified three-way version. And I'm actually going to talk about that in just a moment. But first, I want to give everybody a chance to say hello and introduce themselves. So, starting with you, Poro.
Why do you have to start with me?
Because you're at the top of the screen.
I don't have a good way to introduce myself anymore because I don't really stream anymore. But I have opinions, which I guess is good. And I Twitter a lot, but no one cares. And now I also have a blog.
Oh no, that's not true. You are the Twitter queen or king. I don't know which, but whatever. You've got that down pat. We all bow to your.
Has to say, you go on Twitter and then you click on my blog posts and you make me feel good about myself. That's what you do. That's who I am. There you go.
Yeah. All right. And Diggs, why don't you give folks a little bit about who you are here?
I'm the forum king. I'm in the forums constantly and playing some Landmark now that we have PvE and Twitter. I'll tweet out some of my exploration stuff and my adventures in Landmark. And doing a little bit of H1Z1 too, but this is Landmark and EQ next. So
yeah. So I am, of course, Legendary Neurotoxin coming at you this weekend every week on this show. Excuse me. Speaking of, so we've moved things to three-person format here, and I'm actually probably going to be switching things up a little bit further. So next week is actually the 1 year anniversary of Live Feature Rant. I've been doing this show for a year. It's been going since longer than Landmark Live because I started a week before them, and yeah, it's been a hell of a lot of fun talking about the game, giving suggestions, talking about stuff with the community, having folks on, like you two lovely folks. You've been on quite a few times before. And it's just really been fantastic. But things are probably going to be changing up just a little bit, partially because my own schedule is going to be changing a little bit here pretty soon. I'm looking at 40 hours a week, but can't do any overtime days, so it's going to be an interesting thing trying to balance the schedule of the talk shows and everything else. So the timing of the show, the length of the show, and all of that stuff might be getting adjusted just a little bit, but I will definitely have details coming out sometime in the next week or so, and if everything hasn't been set in stone, then it'll most definitely be announced next week. But the main thing to think about, though, next week is we will be doing some giveaways, some station cash cards, and some Trailblazer packs. So I'll be heavily promoting for that one. It'd be great to have all sorts of folks in here. Yup. So that will be.
This is 2500 SC and it's shiny and red, and you get an in-game item that I forgot what it is, and it has not been scratched off.
Daniel the Jack. I think that might be on Dig's side. The static units. There we go. Yeah, that was it. No problem. All right. So we've got some neat stuff to talk about here. First, I wanted to give Lucy a shout out, the newest person to be joining the Evercast show. So just anybody who isn't familiar, Evercast show has been going for about a year and a half now, since SOE Live 2013, and that's Tanlin, Kalest, Flatus, formerly Calbur, but he had to kind of take a step out at some point, and Chewina, who has recently departed from the show due to just needed to have more time for personal stuff and relations and things. So
impending wedding.
Yep, and pending wedding. I said relations. So he's yeah, good stuff going for him, but he's just not going to have the time for the show anymore. So that's fine. Instead, we have Lucy. I can't actually remember how to pronounce if it's Lucity or Lucite or but yeah, she's definitely somebody we've seen here in the community for a while, and just an awesome person to have on the show. A really great contrast to the personalities, and really brings a lot of interesting stuff and entertainment factor too. So definitely, if you weren't tuning into the Evercast show before, you should tune into it. That comes right after Content and Creations on Sundays from that's on from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific time, or 8 to 10 Eastern. So yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. So Dave posted something recently. I'm going to give you folks the link to it. I'm sure a lot of folks have already heard about, and actually, I know a lot of folks have already commented on this one. It's kind of an interesting subject. Basically, he's proposed the idea of, for building contests, instead of having as many claims as you want to submit or as many builds as you want to submit, just one claim that you get to submit for the contest. Now, that doesn't mean you can't build something that's 3, 4, 8 claims large or whatever. That's totally cool. You can do that. But they're only going to want you to submit the one that's the best, the absolute best of the set. So this is kind of an interesting sort of thing. This is basically, well, there's a lot of things I'm wondering about it. So I guess the first thing is, when he talks about limit competitions, is he talking about the race competitions? Is he talking about landmarks of Landmark and Halloween and those kinds of competitions? Are we talking all competitions in general? That alone is something that I'd really like to know, because there's different considerations each way. I would say for something like the Halloween contest or holiday contests, the landmarks of Landmark, stuff along those lines, maybe even spaceship building contests, though one claim is kind of small for some of the amazing stuff we've seen. I could see those being done as a one claim only sort of thing, specifically to do, as he was saying, to focus on detail and experimentation rather than building this giant thing and then, potentially struggling to get it all detailed out. So it's it's kind of an interesting move. It's an interesting direction to go. I know there's definitely been a decent amount of discussion just on the post there about the subject, and I'd really like to get some thoughts from not only everybody in chat there, but from you two as well. What you think about it? First off, do you think this is talking about all contests or just specific ones? And then, should the different contests be considered in different ways?
I was thinking, it sounded to me like it was all of the contests, but I mean, who knows? There's not a lot of details there. It seems like it's a little bit limiting. I don't know. Some people do some fantastic builds that, I don't know, can be restricted to one claim. But I mean, it seems like you should be able to do a multi-claim, as so, 2 claims is 1 submission. But
well, I think when he's saying less copy paste, I think of like some of the wall segments and some of the walls people have made where, there's a lot of it. A lot of the major exterior is, a section plus a support column or something like that, and then that just keeps getting copy pasted along. Now that doesn't mean that there isn't extra definition added, more windows and extra decor, and that the interior and what you see when you're on the other side of the wall isn't completely different and varied. But I can see, trying to move away from copy paste, and that the stuff that we see is all handcrafted, that is all hand worked, that little to none of it is copy pasted, except maybe for initial proportions that are then going to be, hand worked and detailed over the course of the build.
Yeah, but I mean, an ogre building is going to be big, right? It's going to be big and wide, tall and wide, and I don't know. Can you fit an ogre build on one claim and have it look like it's a mansion? I don't know. And for that, why wouldn't you copy paste your columns? I don't. It seems to me like you shouldn't have to, especially you're going to have Rosie breathing down your neck with how ogrezoidal it is. Like you have to
Well,
repeat that every time.
I think it's fine to copy paste the columns, but doing it selectively and having variation, having some 20 size voxel or 20 voxel size columns, having some that are just 8 voxels, and you just put those in little crevices and places, having like 2 or 3 massive 40 voxel ones that are holding up the ceiling, that sort of stuff. Yeah, I could see, well, there's it's not the same exact proportion of columns, so you can't just copy paste everywhere. That instead it would be an emphasis on designing it in such a way that you have to use different proportions and different shapes and sizes in order to actually complete it. Yeah, Daniel the Jack, the ogre stuff is complete. We are actually waiting on the next one, which I don't know. Are we? Is there a workshop tomorrow? We didn't have Landmark live today, so I wasn't 100% sure. A workshop tomorrow?
See, I can't remember because Amneris actually tweeted that we have one, and I think it's tomorrow.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's.
Okay, if anybody in chat can confirm that, that would be great. Because I'm really hoping we're going to get started on the next one here coming up. So, I guess on the subject of copy paste and on the subject of, is one claim going to be enough? Poro, what are your thoughts?
So originally the question was, what is he actually talking about when he says we're going to limit competitions to one claim? Remember Landmarks of Landmark? It wasn't that like all one claim stuff where you had to have a base and then everything was on one claim. So I think it's going to depend on what it is. There might be some things that are more than one claim. But I think he was more talking about the different races. Because they're trying to get a feel for what players want the races stuff to look like. And I don't think you necessarily need more than one claim to do that. You would need more than one claim to do like a complete building and give the person who's looking at it a sense of like scale and massiveness and stuff. But I don't think that those feelings are what they actually are trying to get out of the whole workshop process. I think the stuff they actually are looking for, you could fit in one claim. And it wouldn't be complete, and it wouldn't be a building you would actually put in EverQuest Next usually. But it would have the content that they're looking for. Like he was talking about copy and pasting. Like it seems like a lot of the builds that we're seeing, they're really amazing looking, partly because they use the copy and pasting. Because, the stuff they're copying and pasting looks good, so when you do it on this massive scale, it looks really good. But the people who are evaluating that don't necessarily need all of it. Right. So I don't think it's a problem. Like I know why people are getting upset that it's so limiting and stuff, but I think people are not getting the idea of what's going on here. Like you might need more space to be like, all right, this is its own building that I want to just like put in the game, but that's not the purpose of the competition in the first place.
Yeah, well, okay. So there's kind of two things to that. So you kind of touch on the idea that, just limiting the size for the landmarks of Landmark and, that sort of stuff, just to make sure, you don't really need something that big to demonstrate something cool. The tower that I did for Landmarks of Landmark, it felt big when you were standing outside of it. It felt big when you saw it from a distance, but it was really only one claim. I just used the entire size of it.
Talk about shape language.
What was that?
I like that phrase from Rosie, shape language. That's the stuff that they want to see, I think. Like, you can get a lot of the emotion and stuff from building without having the entire complete thing there, I guess. And this is coming from someone who doesn't build this stuff and isn't very good at building, so you could take it with a grain of salt, but that is what I think.
But doesn't it depend on whether it's, if we're building just for shape language, that's one thing. It's another if it's going to go into the museum, though. If it's going onto the museum island, then I would think it would want to be complete.
I think the other thing is, what we might be looking more for the museum island isn't necessarily complete whole builds that are going to be going into Kinos and going into other dark elf cities and locations throughout the world. But I think it's instead more that they're going to want something that kind of represents a vertical slice of the aesthetic of that race and variations on that. So, it might be the sort of thing where they would be happier with half a two claim house or fort or something, and actually just looking at the cross section of basically where the claim boundary was to be able to kind of see almost the architectural aspect of it that you don't normally see. Actually seeing that cut, seeing how thick all the holes are, where everything actually lines up. They've said that it's okay to give more than one claim or do more than one claim for the process. Just they're going to want you to submit the best one of the group. So if you build something that's 3 or 4 claims tall and there's one specific area that you've really detailed up and really is like, this is the thing that represents this race, they would want that. And I don't know if they would take the entire build or if they would just take that claims content and plop that down on the museum on Foundation.
So the title of this episode should be Vertical Slice. Is that the theme of today, Euro?
Well, Building Foundation is actually the name of it because that's kind of what we're talking about a little bit. Is
I'm just saying I've heard Vertical Slice come up a few times today. Okay.
Well, we were talking about H1Z1 early access stuff in the Theory Forge chat for anybody that wants a little context on that. Yeah. We were talking about different types of early access, and I'm not going to get into that very much. That's more of a who's getting me now sort of discussion. So I'll just hold it for that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting aesthetic in terms of Museum Island then becoming more like ruins than completed works, but maybe.
Well, not ruins, but just segments of a finished product.
Which is segment is a ruin.
No. I mean, it's once again. I think about like looking at something in a science book in cross section, like a cross section of the sun. We can't cut the sun in half and look at that. That just sounds ridiculous. But we can kind of use visual models to kind of demonstrate what we think the different layers of the gobstopper. I mean, the sun looks like. Gobstoppers. I don't know why I thought about those. The different layers. They're delicious. So, a little bit more on this subject then. If it is something where that's actually kind of what I was going to say. If it is something where it's not necessarily that they want a chunk of a completed thing, but they actually want like smaller things, like give me just one room of the building and nothing else. Maybe the doorways in and out, so it doesn't necessarily look ruined. It just looks like it's been sliced out of the piece. Does that seem more like a reasonable way, having those kind of modular chunks and segments and stuff as the thing that we would be mostly focusing on? Because that also has different considerations, whether you're doing an interior, whether you're doing an exterior, if you're doing terraforming and garden stuff without really focusing on a build. Those all seem like different sorts of things people would want to focus on.
I agree with people in chat saying they probably want like modular pieces. I don't think they want you to make this is my speculation on what would make the most sense. I don't think they want you to make a self-contained thing within one claim. So maybe it's not meant to fit in one claim, so then you could just like literally slice it off so it fits, and it would still have all the elements that you want. And I guess if they wanted to look for context, they could still have a way to look at the rest of it, maybe? I don't know. But as far as the Foundation Museum goes, my understanding of that was that it was just there so that we would have a way to see the entries, so we could actually go and look at them in the game, but not like as an end in itself. So I'm not too worried about that if there's like a one claim limit. But I think part of the whole reason this is happening is because they feel like maybe if they limit people in what they're allowed to do, they'll get more creativity because you'll feel like more pressure to fit everything into a smaller space, you know?
Yeah. And for me, I feel like that's only been a part of it for the contests. In particular, for most of the contests, I think for all of the race ones, we get to experiment for as long as we get to experiment, and then they give us the 2 week warning of, okay, here's all the specific shapes and sizes and proportions that we really want. You've got 2 weeks to take everything that you've learned and everything that you've built and somehow force it into these proportions. I feel like that's been a really limiting part of the process, and I hope that this approach is going to be one of their ways to try to relieve that. That because you're not building so big, you don't have to, take the best and cut it down. But on top of that, I'm also hoping that they actually give us more details, like at the beginning when they first propose or first provide us the concept art and stuff for the race, to tell us then what they actually want, how big, how many voxels for the size of different types of buildings and different types of things that they're going to want to see from us, sculptures and residences and large halls and throne rooms and stuff like that. So that way, at the very beginning, we can start going towards that and experiment specifically on those things, or go far enough with one thing and realize, well, this probably isn't going to work as a throne room, but if I throw some tables in here, it'd be a great restaurant. Ways to be able to salvage things, if you don't like the direction it's going, but you still like what you've been doing with it. So that's something that I'm really hoping to see coming up here, and I just wonder if the reason why they haven't given us all the requirements up front is because they wanted people to just experiment for a while before going to one specific thing. Or the other thing I'm wondering is if they aren't 100% sure the proportions of what they want us to submit until they've had enough meetings and talked about it and come to a quorum on the subject.
It kind of makes me think of how when they're going through this process without our input, they do lots of concept drawings and stuff, right? And a drawing is never going to have all of the content and detail that a build can have, because you can literally walk inside of it and see everything, and you can decorate it with all kinds of props, and it exists in 3D space. So that's part of the reason I think it makes more sense to have one claim. Like someone said, Dorkish said, it's like ripping out the Mona Lisa's smile and judging that. I almost feel like that's kind of accurate, but at the same time, that's kind of what they would want to do, because they don't necessarily need like the gravitas of the whole giant, magnificent build at once,
Right. And it definitely makes sense for the subject of trying to make it easier to do the judging process, that the smaller entries means a lot less to have to go through. You're not going to get lost. You get something like the ogre build that Devents put out, or Clarity D-Man, who's in chat here, put out, or the Blockheads, their mega build. You can get lost in those. There's definitely places where you can, not see everything because it's so big and has so much going on with it. Less of the Blockheads. I feel like that one's pretty well organized, but and not to say that Devents wasn't organized, but it was just big and sprawling. There was so much to it, and without signposts and other sorts of stuff, it's hard to give all of the finer details of guidance and stuff that you would need to really help people get from point A to point B without getting lost, or needing a map drawn somewhere on one of the walls, which would also be a nice feature, but I'm sure they'll give us that stuff down the road. See, we got a big paragraph there from our good friend Baby Cannon, a foofy girl.
I think what Baby Can is asking is not something we really know right now, because Dave is very vague at this point.
Yeah, I don't know if it's only going to be one claim per contest or if it'll be multiple claims, but you can only submit one entry of one claim at a time. It's 140 characters isn't enough to really give us all of the details, so we're just going based on what was provided. And here I'll post the link again for everybody.
Well, hopefully we'll get some more details in the next workshop or the next Landmark Live. I mean, I'm hoping it's just a couple of days to think it through, and then we'll get some more details from the devs.
Probably. It could even be something that they tell us tomorrow on the workshop show, considering workshop does have a big interface with the building process. That would actually be a great place to announce, any changes of that sort.
Right.
Yeah. And that's kind of the funny thing. Even though it's branded as EverQuest Next, it seems like anytime that there's a building contest in Landmark, Workshop is probably going to be involved a little bit. So they're still kind of connected shows to some extent. Okie dokie. So is there any other thoughts on the one claim for the build stuff in particular? Nope. All right. So, while we're talking about the subject, something that I've said maybe a couple times in the past, and I was maybe not sent behind, but thought was a good idea. At this point, I am 100% behind, and I'm not going to harass the devs over you've got to do this or else things will not go right, because that's just nobody should do that. That's just being a jerk. But something I'd really like to bring up in discussion, and probably bring it up in some different places to have discussions from different angles and avenues come up about it. Opening up the races, opening up the race competitions, instead of doing the vote and then giving us whichever race is the one we're voting on, or dwarf, or however it's going to keep going, to instead just open it up. Just give us all of the races, give us all of the style guides, give us all of the requirements and recommendations, and even open back up Ogre, Dark Elf, and Karen, though with an emphasis that those are going to be touched on again much later down the road. And there's two reasons I would want to do this. For one, I have no idea what the production timeline for Landmark and for EverQuest Next is. I don't know what the plan is for where we're going to be at with the build competitions relative to when we go into open beta, because that's going to basically require a wipe, and that is going to mean everybody's going to lose all of their tools, all their materials, and all their progression, all their props and everything, and it's going to basically be a reset that's going to delay even the most dedicated of builder communities for probably at least a month. Maybe
Unless they're willing to put stuff, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if it'll be something we'll be able to just, up and do, if there's going to be the process of actually having to find recipes for the props or something. Everything could be completely different. So it could be the sort of thing where we do need to either have everything done before open alpha, or open alpha is going to need a creative mode that's separate from access to resources in order to allow people to continue building to the competitions. But that doesn't sound like something that they've really been planning on, to do a creative mode like that. So it's kind of, I say to go with this to help them kind of hedge with the production pipeline and the process for everything. If they need to go to open beta at such and such point, they'll be able to just accelerate the process and say, all right, we're going to be doing this race this week, this race this week, this race this week, and just knock them all out in a short period of time, or even having some of the judgings and stuff overlapping. But it would actually be something that's possible if it's actually all in our hands by that point. The one thing that I'm kind of worried with, we've all been saying, let the ogre stuff wait till the end. A lot of people have been saying, because it's already waited this long, and we want the not the ogre stuff, the dwarf stuff, to wait to the end, because we want the dwarf stuff to look awesome. So a lot of people are waiting till we have all of the features and stuff in before we do the dwarf stuff. And I'm wondering, well, is that going to be the best if we actually have the open beta white before we start working on the dwarf stuff? Is that going to make it easier or harder to do what, we would have been able to previously do otherwise?
Well, no matter when we do stuff, we're always going to be feeling like it's not enough. Like, I wish all of the other competitions had linking and triggering as part of them. But I don't think the devs want to do. I don't think they want to do 2 races at the same time, let alone more than 2. So they already talked about that on the workshop a couple of months ago, saying that they'd rather focus online. That does not seem to leave us a lot of time. How many months did we spend on the Ogre build? At least 2, if not 3. 3?
Felt like 3. It felt like we spent, 3-4 months on Karens. We started on them before SOE Live, and we finished them way, way after.
Yeah. So that gives us, if we do 4 more, that's January of 2016.
Yeah.
And that would give us what? That would give us 7?
That would give us 7, yeah. So we'd still need 1 more. So I think part of the change with the claims in the competition and stuff is that they want to potentially, hopefully, go back to a 6-week cycle. Now, that's going to create some oddness because with Karens and with Ogres, we had so much time to work on it that we were able to get so much more detail and experimentation. Dark Elves, I went back through and toured the Foundation Museum on Sunday of this week, rather. And I gotta tell you, there's some stuff that still holds up, but a lot of it looks out of date, and a lot of it looks undecorated and unfurnished. And a lot of stuff just lacks modern things. We didn't even have water then, so I saw a moat that was aquamarine. It's like, that's totally cool that we had an aquamarine and obsidian moat then, but we have water now, and they haven't even gotten the opportunity to update their old build. So,
right, so we would need time to do 4 more races, plus they want to revisit Dark Elves at least. So, yeah. They either got to speed some stuff up. Plus, they also want to do, they mentioned maybe doing some non-playable races. Not a lot of time to throw some extra stuff in there, so,
right.
Not a lot of time.
Not a lot of time, yeah.
The entire builder community decided, like, we're going to do all the races at once, and they were kind of their own team. They probably could, just because there's so many of them and there's so much talent, but the team at SOE has to also be going through this process, and I don't think they can do more than 1 at a time. So I think it would make sense maybe to just release all of the documents and stuff that people need to start doing this, because you don't necessarily have to pay attention to what they're doing until you're ready to see it. But like, some people are never going to build anything for Ogres or for whatever is currently going on, but they want to do something else. So why not just give them what they need to do it now, I guess? Unless, like, you're afraid of giving them an advantage in competition, maybe? I don't really know.
I would say there's definitely a lot of letting people work on the thing, and I totally agree with you. Letting people work on the thing they want to work on, that would really help out. Even if they actually said, this is the race that we're working on right now. However, if you absolutely do not want to work on this race, but you totally want to work on an EQN race, here's the style guides for the other ones. We aren't going to get into too much of the detail and too much of the lore. Here's just a little bit to get you started. That would at least be enough for people to really, start hammering the stuff that they do want to get after. And, it's one of those things where in how I was thinking of wording it, I had initially thought, oh, well, if they do this, that'll allow builders to build what they want to instead of what they're being told to. And I realized, well, actually, builders can build whatever the fuck they want to. It's just, if we get the style guide to use as a prompt, it'll allow us to start experimenting in the right direction earlier on. And yeah, you're right, Poro. Like you said in chat, it is. I think it is more of a guide. I don't know that any of the stuff is specifically going in, one for one any of the builds from Landmark into EverQuest Next.
Yeah, I think they would specifically mark stuff like that and be like, all right, now we are accepting things for that. Because people, that's going to be really the hypest when that happens.
Yeah. Well, I don't even think we'll have all of the parts. I think part of it will be end game for race builds and competition builds and stuff is actually getting modular parts that we can put in that will generate different things that we've defined. So one iteration of the room that you've created will have in the four furniture locations maybe a table with a couple of chairs next to it, maybe a little decorative fountain or a little brazier cooking fire or whatever. So each room, even though it's the same room, as it's put elsewhere in different places or as it's approached at different times throughout the game, it'll have different stuff in it. And it's the sort of thing where you submit the claim for the process and they lay out like five of the same thing and look at one in detail and then kind of breeze through the other four to see what the variations are based on the some of the parameters that have been provided. Because when I think of like similar outposts, they're kind of a lot the same but different features, a little bit of different decor. It's been set up differently. One of them that's closer to the coast is going to have like fish and barrels and fishing equipment, while one that's more inland is going to have like bows and hunting equipment and like leather tanning racks and stuff like that. So yeah, I've ranted here. Does that?
I think Rosie is going to want more control over guiding the bill. Somebody asked, they asked a couple weeks ago, and we touched on it on Theory Forge last week, whether, and the way the question was worded was kind of, do you think Rosie will be intimidated by what players are building once we get to EQ Next and we see all the great stuff that the players have built in comparison to what the devs have built. And I think in general, Rosie's not going to feel intimidated by that. I think it would be an issue giving people style guide and letting them run rampant for months, doing what they think is their vision based on the style guide, and her not having a chance to go back in and giving tweaks like, we want to save this for this race. We don't want you to go in this direction because of this and this. I think she's going to want more of a hand in guiding where people are going rather than just letting people, go crazy with their visions just based on the style guide. But we'll see. I mean, I think they have to do something if they're going to try and squeeze all the races in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just thinking about the timing of things. If they switch it up to a 6-week cycle and they started that basically the beginning of February, then yeah, it would be tight. But I think they would be able to get a lot of the stuff in potentially relatively close to when they want to get to open beta. But I remember mid to late last year, maybe around September, October, I recall Dave saying something to the extent of wanting it to be an open beta in or before March of 2015. Now, once again, I don't know, if they're taking the building stuff into consideration with the launch of open beta, then I really don't think that would work. Really don't think that would be possible. If they're not taking that into consideration, if they assume that, yeah, people are going to be put out for a little while, but they'll have to build up their resources and then we'll eventually start doing the race builds again, then yeah, I could see them doing it March. In fact, if that's the goal, I would see them doing that sooner than later. Maybe having one last competition before doing the wipe and then waiting a month and starting to get back into it again, because I think anything before 1 month after the wipe is asking too much from the community. Anything after the 1 month wipe, I think, is starting to get into the territory where people are getting back on their feet. They're well established again. They're geared up. They're down into tier 5 already. If somebody's building and they need a specific material that they can't access because they're not tough enough, they would actually be able to leverage people from the community to help them out with it. And it's one of those things that's kind of weird. If you're a longtime builder in the community, you can just ask and like see crew chat or whatever. Hey, anybody got some extra whatever material, and like 10 people will just send you a pile of it. I don't know if it'll be.
I've been harvesting for so long though that I feel like there's just a giant amount of everything lying around. I remember at one point I got really frustrated and bought an amaranthine builder chest or something for that octopus. So now when open beta starts, I'm going to be like, oh, I have all of this purple rocks now. Great.
Hell yeah, I'll trade you for that.
Yeah, I'm hoping the amaranthine is going to get my Poro business started once open beta happens. That, and I think I bought copper too, because I was just mad at life.
I still can't remember if I've actually bought copper or not. I feel like I did at some point, but maybe not. I think I actually might have bought one large chest of jute at some point, just so I could make frickin' rope for the Karen stuff. But I think I might have not ended up doing that because the amazing, awesome, super harvesting power of D-Man was able to overcome my need for clarity. D-Man, it just. I don't know that they do anything other than like build and harvest and landmark. Like for the amount of time that goes into those builds and just having tons and tons of materials on hand. Do you do anything? I'm not saying like you don't have like a day job or anything, but what else do you do, man? You just like nuts. You're absolutely crazy. And also some of the best prop work and some of the best like creatures and even uses of some small uses of linking and triggering in really effective ways. Just some amazing stuff coming from that dude. It's just awesome. Oh, and a kick-ass fighter too. You're right. But I guess going back on the subject here, it seems like it would be kind of a struggle to start doing the race builds and stuff after going to open beta and having a full wipe. One month, it seems like it'd maybe be enough time, but I don't know. Then also it depends on what the actual timing is for getting into EverQuest Next, because from what I understand, the goal is to get into or be prepared to get into closed beta for EverQuest Next coming sometime this year. They've definitely said closed beta signups for EverQuest Next are going to start this year. Whether or not we'll actually get our hands on it in any form or not, we'll probably have a better idea after SOE Live.
Can we talk about what Stoneblade just said? Because I think they were sort of clarifying what the question was they were asking before. They said that the game has to be put out at some time, and Brizzy will feel the game doesn't look as good as what the players can make time-wise. I think I understand what's going on there, because if you combine all of the player time being spent on this, it's like a long-ass time, and there's way more effort going into that than the dev team is ever going to have in, like, the infinity of the universe. So maybe they might feel like they can't produce stuff on that level and as quickly as players can, just because there's so many players. But they're not going to be like, oh my god, we can't be as good artists as these people. Like, I don't think that's what Stoneblade meant.
I don't think the devs are going to be depending on player content to get EQ Next started. They like working with the players and having the players develop the game along with them, but it's not like they aren't going to be able to make a game. I mean,
yeah, I'm not worried about that either. But I think some people might like look at landmark builds and be like, "Oh, this is what EverQuest Next is going to look like," and then not every single building is like ridiculously detailed and handcrafted by some person who spent like 500 hours on it. You know what I mean?
Oh, like that.
Probably way more props and stuff, so I think it's gonna look fine.
I think of that Victorian house like midway through beta that was super, super propped out and just like ultra decorated. That was like above and beyond, especially for what the how the game was performing at the time, above and beyond what you would have expected to see from anybody. But that took a lot of time and effort. Poor you. I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you gonna say something there?
No.
No. Okay.
And I bet the devs can cheat.
In what way?
I bet they don't have to exactly use landmark tools to create.
No, I don't know. They can use props. They can probably use some of the experimental voxel to mesh technology that, while we don't have the tools and the interface for it, may exist in the office in a way that they can do meaningful things with right now.
Right.
Yeah, and that'll be really neat. So what was that, Diggs?
It looked like Poro was muted, but she could have been talking to somebody behind her.
I'm not supposed to talk because I have Fran here, and yeah, so if I'm talking, I'm not talking to you. I remember to hit my button. This is a tan-
No tanlining here. Will they do they does anyone think they will make use of voxel mesh grammars that Voxel Farm has? I would imagine they're using as much as they can from Voxel Farm that makes sense for the engine. They've, I'm sure, got the license and access to everything. And they've said that in the past. Sometimes they'll do what the Voxel Farm solution is, and sometimes they'll look at the Voxel Farm solution and make their own version kind of based on or using some similar considerations, because something that they're doing works a little bit differently. And, you know, that's the thing. Every single application of voxels in a 3D environment is completely different. How Voxel Farm approaches things is completely different than how Voxel Form approaches things, which is what I work with. What/who, because it's mostly one dude. But, yeah, it's something that I'm sure that they're considering what the best way is, and like I said, it might be something that they've got working, but they don't have the interface for, and they don't have all of the data structures and management for, because there might be some extra considerations that they'll want for us that, you know, only things that you can access on the admin client right now. They're not going to give us the admin client. Player made props in a month. Oh, that would be so cool, Daniel the Jack. I really hope that's true. I really hope that's the case. That would be the bee's knees.
Dave said in a month or two, but, you know, it's Dave, so dates.
6 months.
Who knows?
Estimates come, deadlines go, you know.
It would take some time for us to start getting some quality looking props, I guess.
But I guess the thing with that is, once we have the ability to make props, it'll take a lot of the emphasis off the team to have to worry about that. They can then focus more on materials to help us make the props better and make more varied props. But I think then the focus will really be on emitters, because they aren't going to be giving us the ability to make emitters, this far as I'm aware, unless they actually give us an in-engine tool to, you know, select the sprites that are being used, select the, you know, the rate and the size and the color and the lifetime of the particles and all that stuff. I'd love to have that. What was that?
It wouldn't be very hard for them to do. It would probably be an easier process even than, like, allowing props. Because you would just be using 2D, like, little images, right, that spray out, and then you just choose, like, how often they come out, how long they last, how big they are, etc.
You know,
I know this too.
I was gonna say, for you, me, and Diggs, we've worked on game stuff. We're smart people. It's intuitive for us because we can do it. I wonder if that's going to be the same experience with, you know, the general builder or the average person that maybe doesn't have the same kind of technical know-how. if all of the different, configurable parameters will make sense to them, or if it's going to be the sort of thing where they pretty much need to be watching a tutorial for like the first 3 months of trying to set up emitters until they can, finally understand how everything works.
Jeff wants everything to be entry level, easy enough for a 10-year-old to start working with, and then, have to learn how to make things, getting into complexity later, but easy to learn, difficult to master type stuff. So it should be fairly easy to get started.
People were discussing in chat a little bit, like, how SOE has said before that they're going to be able to do the same things that we can do. And I feel like that's a little bit vague. And also Mythforge was talking about the mesh to voxel grammars that Voxel Farm has. And I'm so excited about that. And I don't think we're going to ever get it, but I really hope that we do. Because it would be really awesome. I could try to explain what it is, but it's kind of complicated and hard for me, so I don't know if Reese is better at that.
Yeah, I would have to look at the videos and all the information to try to give a shot to that. But I guess the non-technical version, it's totally super cool.
Yes, that. So what it is you would sort of write, kind of like a computer program, except you don't have to be a programmer to do it, directions for how to build a thing. So you build like some pieces of it, sort of. Like, let's say you have a wall, and the wall is made up of kind of repeating things at certain intervals. You could kind of tell it, like, here's the pieces I want, build the wall at this length, and it'll just do it based on the instructions you've given, instead of having to actually place down every single voxel and do all of that stuff.
Ooh, automation stuff.
Yeah, that's in Voxel Farm right now. It's called Grammars, which is interesting because that's, how we define computer languages is with a grammar. And I love that stuff, and I want it. I want it so bad, but they're probably not going to give it to us because it's really powerful. Because then you don't have to, like, copy and paste a thing and then refix it to be in the space that you want. Like, if you want a wall that's 70 voxels wide, it's a totally different process now from doing one that's 50 voxels wide. You have to change the whole way everything is done. But with this, you would just be able to specify the grammar and build some stuff, and then it would do the rest for you.
That would be really nice.
What I find interesting about that is Storybricks' kind of grammar, as we've seen with Storybricks outside of Landmark, and EverQuest Next. So that makes me wonder if it will stay that way. Will it stay Grammar Bricks? And if that's going to stay Grammar Bricks, I don't see why we wouldn't be able to use an interface with grammar for voxels too. Even though that's not the way it's been set up previously. It's just kind of interesting to me.
I would love for them to extend that idea from Storybricks to actual voxels, because I don't see that much of a value in a lot of this really tedious work that people are doing, because they're really, really creative, and I feel like a lot of this stuff is just in their way of being creative. And I think some people would think this is too powerful unless people do too much that's not their own skill. It's like the game doing it for them. But I don't really agree with that. I think it'd be great. Some people seem kind of confused. So if you imagine like a sentence has grammar in whatever language you're in, it's predictable, right? So you can specify rules for like how to put together an English sentence. So there's going to be like verbs in certain places and nouns in certain places, and there's rules for how they can be in relation to each other, right? So with this, you would be able to do that with like chunks of building, and then you would specify something vague like how wide you want something to be, and then it would just kind of fill in the blanks based on the rules that you've given it, instead of you having to build the entire thing from scratch. I hope that makes more sense.
Yeah, if any 3D modelers, anybody who's worked with Maya, Melscript kind of comes to mind. The idea of, instead of actually moving the vectors and changing the textures and everything, the entire, any my 3D model is essentially just a write out of the Mel script of where everything's at and how everything's applied to everything. So the best 3D programmers, it isn't, or 3D not programmers, but 3D modelers, it isn't just their ability to massage the pixels in the visual space. It's also the ability to actually work directly in the script and change things, one for one. Being able to copy vectors, like mirror one half to the other half, is way easier to do with Mel script than it is with manual controls and other things. Um, I'm sorry.
There's a video of this somewhere, by the way, that would be a lot easier for explaining what it actually is.
I guess
Because they show a video of them like resizing something and showing how it'll like reformulate the way it is based on how big you've told it to be. I'm gonna find it and I'm gonna link it.
is that so? Is that, or is that not associated with the props, or is that just voxel placement?
I think it's just voxels. Maybe you could also apply it to props. I don't really know, honestly.
Yeah, because I mean, if it's just voxel placement, this is basically like giving some instructions and putting it on a conveyor belt rather than having to hammer each piece in individually or whatever. It's, if it's just a matter of automating the process, I think that's great. And I don't really think personally that it's too powerful for anybody, or that it makes something that's out of somebody's skill set otherwise to build, but instead gives potentially a more meaningful or more easy to work with way to do what they want to do. When I want to build a staircase, I don't want to copy paste every fucking stair one after another after another. That sucks. That's so annoying. I'd rather just say, okay, do this, and every time I press the enter key, put another one, one voxel this way and one voxel this way, and just mash the enter key until it's as high as I want it.
It's actually a lot more powerful than that, though, because what you're talking about is just like looping, iteration, doing the same thing over and over. But this would be able to, I mean, you would be writing the rules, you would have to be able to write them in the first place, so it would still be you. But then the computer is following your rules, and they can be a lot more nuanced than just like repeat this over and over. And that's what I think is really awesome about it. So maybe if you didn't have that tool, you would not have built the exact same thing. You know what I mean? And I think that's why some people will say that it's giving you skill where you didn't actually have any. And people are going to be like, I remember back in the day when you had to place every little voxel by hand, and everything was pure and good, and the forums were wonderful.
For some reason, the counter to that, and this is totally a non sequitur, so we'll probably move on to the next subject after this, is, it's, never mind. Basically, I was going to make an analogy to doing Jackson Pollock style paintings when everyone was just expecting you to do normal portraits and other classic paintings. But then I realized that really doesn't actually make any fucking sense whatsoever. So, yeah. That's, yeah. Is it your crappy... Tenlin, I actually really liked what you were doing, the old tree elf house thing with the props leading up the curved path. Which I remember seeing that like 6 months ago. That was really, really cool. I hope you still have that going, because it's definitely pretty awesome. Yeah, Daniel the Jack, like AutoCAD. But there's some things where I suppose, I don't know, if you say it's something that somebody can only do because it's been, it's being done by a pattern or by a formula, it's, I guess then the question is, well, how hard is it to actually do that pattern, that formula, that configuration by hand, and then copy paste it and have it work the same way? And it could be the sort of thing where it's the fine minutia, the fine detail of having to work through that copy pasting process and having it break and having to fix it that limits the person's skill. They can design, conceptualize this stuff, but the reason why they wouldn't otherwise do it is just because the technology breaks on them when they try to. But I agree. There's definitely, it's a different way of doing things, and I think it'd be awesome. I would love to have it. So we talked a lot about a lot of different subjects with building. Is there anything else on the subject of building that either of you would like to talk about here? Right this minute. I mean, we come back on previous episodes to talk about other stuff too, but
No, I just wish that we had time to do some non-race competitions too. Well, I'd love to do a sci-fi competition. I'd love to do a steampunk competition. I'd love to see a non-player race competition, like a kobolds or gnolls or
goblins.
Something else.
Yeah.
But
I second this.
we don't.
If they just wanted to do a linking and triggering spaceships contest right now and run that for a month, it would be awesome. They would get tons of entries, and I already know like 3 winners. Well, actually, I don't know any winners because they're all multiple claims. The Mantis, that's 2 claims, I believe. Maybe it's just 1 claim. I think it's 2. The Juggernaut's like 2 or 3 claims. Bob Dob ship is like 2 or 3 claims.
But it's a vertical slice. Just slice them in half. Doesn't have to be the.
Yeah, just give the best part. I don't know. That would be weird, like seeing the competition winners. It's like, oh, this is the engine room, part of the mess hall, and captain's quarters of the Juggernaut. Yeah. That would push back EQN. Maybe. I mean, I guess it really, the EQN stuff, I guess it really does only depend on whether or not they're actually using what we make for the stuff that they're going to be putting in, or the stuff that they're using to base on, what they want to put in, or if it's actually arbitrary and they were just doing this to get some extra ideas out of us. It could be arbitrary. They could have made Landmark and EverQuest Next without us. 100%. It wouldn't have been the same product.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to hold back EQN just because they haven't gone through all the races. That's not going to happen.
The other thing is the beginning of EQN closed beta. They can just have stick figures for the houses for all I care. I mean, all of that stuff is probably going to be updated or replaced over the course of, the closed beta process anyway. So if they just go with what they have available and they, over the course of closed beta, take the time to upgrade everything based on what we've done through the workshop competitions, that is what I would actually kind of more expect to see is, not that EQN is going to be held back or prevented, but that during the course of us playing in EQN and working on the stuff in Landmark, and that'll actually give us a lot more context, actually seeing what the large races look like, trying to go through, a build of certain proportions. That would really help us out a lot more, and probably be the thing that we'll need to, really be able to finalize some of the races that we're working on for all the proportions and the sizes, especially if large race or small races rather will have considerations where maybe a smaller residence isn't big enough for a human to get in without, banging their head or having to squat down or something. And I would kind of like that. I like the idea of, Gandalf having to squat to get through the door of the Hobbit hole, and feeling tall the entire time because the roof is like a few inches above his head. That that makes sense to me. I like that. But it's hard to really say what the proportions are going to be like until they either give us like small humans or just let us play as those smaller races in EverQuest Next, and then extrapolate the knowledge back to Landmark.
We're supposed to get large humans maybe next week. Maybe. And I would hope small humans would be forthcoming soon after. I don't know if that means size potions as well. Who knows?
Yeah. Size potions. Size potions would be nice.
At EverQuest Next, do you think they're actually going to want there to be buildings that you can't get into if you're too big because they're meant for small races? Like if I was playing a normal sized person and I couldn't get into somewhere because I was too big, I would be kind of sad, honestly.
There's two things I would expect to be their solution. One, ogres and Karens constantly carry around a potion of shrinking because they're just going to need it to get through some places sometimes. And it'll be the thing that, because like the strength and parameters of the characters and the races, they would be too powerful for that size of a location, assuming that that sort of thing actually does correlate with the characters. Then the shrinking potion would bring their attributes more to the normal size races. Again, I don't think they're going to do something like that, but if that's how they want to do it. And the other thing, I could see them adding more like squatting and crawling and, going prone to actually crawl through tunnels that Ratonga would otherwise just be able to, freely run through standing. So you would have limited mobility, but you'd still be able to get through. Or otherwise, you have the option. It's a voxel world. If it's not a place you really have to worry about being too rude with, just make a passage. Just knock down the wall. Just, bust through it. Bring a
I think
pulverizer.
I think it's going to be smash through and potions.
Think
Those are going to be
Wouldn't
the
people
options.
be upset if you smash through their house?
Well, that's the thing is, if you're in
You'll be able to
Kinos,
reset.
if you're in Kinos, you're probably not smashing into houses. It would probably be at the same time, housing restrictions that you have to have the doorways so big so that everyone can get through. If it's, the Hobbit or half elf, or not half elf, halfling village rather, somewhere way outside, all the towns. It's just a little town of its own. And you go in and you want to visit with them and you're an ogre, well, either you're going to have to squat down really low to be able to kind of peek in and say hello, or you're going to have to be that guy that knocks down doors and steals stuff and then runs away because you're clearly causing destruction there.
Be a bad person.
You have to be a bad person if you want to get that loot.
Or a potion. Or a potion.
If
Or a potion.
your restrictions on anybody who's not a small race, like wouldn't you have some advantages here if you are tiny?
Sorry, say again?
Wouldn't you have some advantages if you're tiny? Like it would just be more convenient to be small because you wouldn't have to worry about ever shrinking or breaking anything down.
Yeah, but at the same time, you also wouldn't have the same jump height and ledge grab considerations, so you would need somebody to carry you up, or you'd need to carry like a little grappling hook or something. And I don't know if we would have a landmark style grappling hook that's more akin to Terraria. I feel like in EverQuest Next, if we're gonna have a grappling hook, it seems like something you'd actually have to kind of throw and lob up and have it hook on something for you to be able to climb. So I could see that being the trade off is you don't have as much stuff that you can do, or there might be a lot more physical puzzles. There might be like you can't get in here unless you're big enough to push this boulder, and if you're not a large size race, you're just not going to make that boulder budge unless you bring four of your buddies.
Yeah, I think there would be ogre stuff that Ratonga would have trouble getting, scaling, and hopefully giant builds that Ratonga would have troubles, and they would want size potions as well.
Yeah, I could see that. So, yeah, that's a lot to consider there. That'll be really interesting. And I that's one of those things that why once again I wonder if they're looking to actually have us finish the rest of the builds and everything when EverQuest Next or closed beta is actually in our hands, so that way we'll be able to use those proportions to help us, determine how big and small things should be. Or it might just be between now and then they're actually deciding on, this very thing that we've been talking about, how big doorways should be, mandatory in the world of EverQuest Next, or if they shouldn't be mandatory size. So, yeah, I'm I'm really excited to see what they do either way. It's going to really help us builders get a lot more direction, and it's really going to help kind of give more of an idea of what we should be expecting in EverQuest Next. But, you know, That'll be this year. Last year was the year of EverQuest. This year is the year of EverQuest Next, specifically. And then next year we actually get to play it. So, kind of branching to a little bit of a different subject with EverQuest Next. I'm sure you folks have noticed I'm wearing the EverQuest Next instead of the Landmark shirt, which I usually wear on the show here. Or maybe you didn't notice. I don't care. So I kind of wanted to focus on another subject with EverQuest Next. Now, I've been kind of thinking and talking about various different aspects of why there's more to the 40 classes than what equipment you have and what origin keyword combinations you have. That already is quite a bit of stuff and quite a bit of metagame to balance, and as a player deciding what classes you want to unlock to get what access to what abilities definitely plays into that. And as we play on the game more, there's definitely going to be some things that probably create better synergy with other things, so there'd be things that people want to specify towards. But there's one other thing that kind of falls out in this argument and discussion, I should say. It's not really an argument, it's a discussion. It's a rant now. So talent trees, with one of the things that I've been thinking about hasn't really been talked about that much, is the idea of, okay, open up any MMORPG that exists right now for the most part. Open up your class window. There's a talent tree, or maybe multiple talent tree branches that you can invest points in to give your character different specificity for different roles. Giving the example of... No, I'm not going to use that example. Let's say you're a class that's kind of like a mid sort of thing. Like, okay, I'll use a red wizard from Final Fantasy as an example. So you can use, heavier equipment. You can use a lot of all the different types of magic. You aren't necessarily perfect at any of them, but there's potentially ways to specify that you put your points towards the magic side. So while you're the whole class of red wizard, that you can do a little bit of everything, you're better at your magic, so you're almost comparable to...
I don't understand what that means in terms of EQ next. So what would the origin and the two keywords be for the red wizard?
I don't know. It would be, if it's a lower tier class, then probably one or two origins with individual keywords. If it was a higher tier version of the class, probably at least 3 different origins. The keywords actually don't matter as much as the origins.
No. A class only has 1 origin and 2 keywords.
Nope. Actually, if you go back to the... I'll have to bring it up again. But they showed in the guide, the list of 40, some classes had 3. I think even one class had 4.
Some have
origins.
No, but some do have 3. No. Keywords. Damage types, not origins.
No, that's one of the perks of the higher classes, is that they actually have more origins.
There's no higher class.
We'll have to look at that. If anybody has, if you have that handy, the stuff from SOE Live, I'll have to track through my files here and see if I have it. But I'm pretty sure I saw some of them that had more than one handy, or more than like 2 origins available to them.
It's really
well,
one
it does make
origin.
Sense. If you have horizontal progression, you'd be rewarded with maybe more complexity and nuance instead of just like power. But I don't specifically remember whether there were ever more than 1 origin, I guess.
Yeah, there's not more than 1 origin.
Okay.
Some have more than 2 damage types.
Yeah, I'll have to look at that again, because I could have sworn there were some that had 3 origins to them.
Do Google for Landmark EQ Next. No, EQ Next origins, and then do images.
Okie dokie. But anyway, this is kind of diverting from the getting a bit off from the subject. But what I was mainly talking about is the idea that each class would have its own kind of talent trees that specify its role in different ways. So, yeah, there might be some classes in the rogue tier that have same equipment or very similar equipment to one of the classes in, say, the warrior tier or the hunter tier or whatever. But hunter ranger, whatever it would be. But it's so they have similar they can have, that class and the similar class's abilities on the hotbar. Whichever one they're using, they can use the other ones. But what would actually make them different, having the same equipment, having the same abilities, is what they do in their talent tree, and that would be specific to that class. If I didn't rant too much, did that kind of make sense?
Say it again. I was putting that link in. I was finding the link. Say it again. So, how do you think it's going to be similar to a talent tree?
Well, basically, let's say Class A has, they can use swords and daggers and leather, and Class B can use swords and bows and leather. They're from two different kind of class tier progressions, but if you equip the sword and the leather, and you use the Class A and class abilities stuff on your hotbar, why would there be any difference from using Class A and Class B at that point, other than maybe their silhouette for how they stand? Because they're using the same abilities and they're using the same equipment. And they
wouldn't be using the same weapon abilities.
Well, what I'm saying is if you put the 4 abilities from the other class on your hotbar,
the 4 abilities would be character abilities, not weapon abilities.
Are weapon abilities
tied to the weapon and the class?
But I thought the character abilities, the 5, 6, 7, and 8, were based on what the 1, 2, 3, and 4 that other races would get, or other classes rather would get.
Huh? So you have the 4 through 8, if those are character abilities, and you can swap in any abilities that fit that modus slot from another class. But the weapon abilities are fixed to the class, to the weapon. So let's say you have a wizard that uses a sword and a warrior that uses a sword. When you swap classes, the abilities on that sword are going to change based on the class that's equipped.
Oh, I see my confusion, by the way. It was that they can have, you're right, they can have up to 3, maybe even 4 different keywords, but it looks like they are just the same origin for each class. Gotcha. Okay.
And I don't think that's based on tier. I think it's just based on the class.
Maybe.
We only seem to get 2. It seems like we unlock 2 character abilities for each tier. So, you would probably start off with only if you have 3 damage types you can use. Yeah, you'll start off with only 2 keywords out of 3, but.
Oh, thanks, Stanley. Yeah, I'll have to look back at that stuff. But anyway, I guess going back to the subject of the talent trees, it's the idea that if I'm playing a warrior, let's say that's the tier 1 of the fighter type classes. So I've got my origin keywords, I've got the abilities available to me, but then on top of that, I'm guessing that there would be a multi-branch talent tree that you'd be able to specify, things that would maybe give you 5% more damage on your damage over times, or more resistance to certain types of attacks, or maybe something that improves your margins for an active dodge of some sort. So you have...
Those are going to be items.
You think those are going to be items in EverQuest Next?
Yeah.
You don't think that there's going to be a talent tree progression for each class?
No.
Why not?
you're going to unlock 2 new abilities each time you progress to the next tier in the class. That's what they showed at SLE Live. Weren't you there?
Yeah, I was. I guess I'll have to review that stuff again. But it's beyond just items. Having things like you play a class for long enough, beyond just the stuff that you unlock for playing it. I guess I will have to review that stuff again. But I guess it's that beyond just the origins and the equipment, that they might have other forms of progression for each class, other things you can do with each one that will essentially give more specificity, more variation on what you can actually do with it. Whether that's something similar to talent tree, or if it's really just what abilities you've unlocked and have available and can equip, or if it's something where it's an advancement of the abilities, like you're this class, you use that class's ability 1,000 times, it upgrades to the next level. You use it 10,000 times, it upgrades to the next level. That sort of thing, and that actually kind of ties in with like real world mastery, like the idea that you aren't actually a master at something until you've done it like 10,000 times right.
There's some cultural bonuses that we get for that. It's Dwarven Tenacity is a perk that we get if you drink 500 barrels of Dwarven Ale. So there's stuff like that, but that's not really tied to class. And they haven't shown anything like progression through use of abilities. I think, in fact, in 2013, they said that you don't get better from using skills over and over again.
Okay.
So it's not from usage.
Well, I guess let's see how it all plays out, and if that's changed at all. Because you said that was in 2013, and things changed and stuff. But no, you're right. That's I'm sure there's going to be a lot of different ways to achieve. There might be things that if you're playing a specific class, when you complete a quest, that you get advancement versus if you're playing a different class, you'll advance that class or get special things for it. All right. So I guess kind of jumping to the last little thing that I wanted to kind of talk about here before we kind of move to a little bit of QA and wrap up stuff. The idea of role-playing the class that you choose, and it's not so much that it's like, oh, I'm going to be a warrior, therefore I'm going to pick the warrior class, so much as that I think the game is actually going to be doing a lot of its selections and a lot of the Storybricks interactions based on the class that you have selected. I probably talked about this in previous episodes, but kind of bringing it back up again, the idea that if you want to, not necessarily if you want to advance as a warrior doing quests, you'll quest as a warrior, so much as the NPC maybe just won't give you that quest unless you've selected a class that has this set of abilities actually available to it, that actually has those, by default, that you don't have to select something from a different class or a different set to be able to complete whatever it is. Having a group heal for something where you need to save somebody, or being a class that uses ranged weapons because you need to take down some sort of an airbase target. Whatever it may be. I definitely think the class that you've specifically got selected is going to matter quite a bit for really all Storybricks-based interactions. So it's going to be something that players will have to do selectively. Is if you want to play as a warrior the entire game, even though you can advance in the different classes by investing your points into them, that you're still only going to be given things that a warrior is going to be given in terms of story interactions, because you don't by default have some of the other abilities that you would need to maybe complete that quest. Do you think that's actually going to be... You're shaking your head, Diggs. You don't think that's going to be an issue?
Yeah. No, because Storybricks AI remembers everything that you do, and it's not just what you do, but how you do it. So it's going to remember your warrior would be your base class, but you might have rogue abilities swapped in, and if you're using those rogue abilities, the Storybricks is going to remember that you, and the NPCs are going to remember that you used those abilities, and that's partly what they're going to be reacting to. But one of the other things that they're going to be reacting to is what keywords you use, and you might save the farmer from having his barn burned by the orcs, but if you use affliction to do that, the farmer might run away from you when you go to, grab your reward, because, you didn't do that in a way that seems trustworthy. So there's a lot that you're going to have to be balancing, because it's not just what you do, but how you do it, and how the NPCs feel about how you did things. So it can't just be based on what class you have equipped, although that'll probably be a big piece of it, yeah.
Okay. Poro, do you have any thoughts on this?
This stuff is really
Oh.
things I do not have any idea about that are coming, and I can sit here and be like, I wish things happened like this, because that's what Poro wants. But that doesn't mean it's gonna happen. Even though it would be really cool, like we could come up with this whole plan of how things should be, and it still won't happen. And I think that there's a lot of stuff, like more than we know, that we don't know about yet, in terms of that, like how we're gonna interact with different NPCs in ways that are maybe not even intended by us and stuff like that, and how it relates to what kind of class you pick and how you choose to do things. So that's all I will say about that now. So it's going to be very complicated and interesting, and I don't know how it's going to work, but I think I know that much.
Fair enough. All right.
The example that the devs gave at I think it was the lore panel for 2013 is that if you are on the road and you are stealing from travelers, the followers of Talon might come and ask you to join the Church of Brigands, the religion of Brigands, or at least to ally with them. And I think that's not going to matter what base class you have equipped when you do the stealing. I think it's just going to be that that's the activity that you've been doing, and however you do it, raises a flag for Talon and says, hey, this person, I like what he does. It doesn't matter what class, but...
Okay. I get you. And you're right, Poro. It is something that it's really hard to say at this point, because we really don't know enough about the stuff.
Yeah, like, how they were saying, all the NPCs are going to remember you, and you're going to have a reputation, but not in, like, the grindy number sense of, like, other games. I think what they remember and how and why is something we actually don't know that much about yet. And how your class is going to determine different ways you can interact with the world is another thing I don't think we really know that much about yet. So...
Yeah, I definitely, from what I gather, there's not going to be anything similar to faction grinding that we've seen in a lot of other games. Instead, it's going to be something a lot more akin to you're the last person in a major battle, the last player that's actually standing up to the enemies. Everybody else has already retreated, or maybe they joined the other side. And even though you get your ass kicked, there's no way you were going to win. Because you didn't retreat, because you were the last one there, because you fought your hardest, you get remembrance and recognition, not only from the races who you were trying to help and protect and anybody who they're associated with, but probably even from the enemies, that seeing, even against the odds, you were willing to defy them for, a fleeting moment until they, tore you to shreds and you had to respawn. But that you actually, stood up against them and getting some respect there. Dark Elves, I could see definitely being, and Ogres as well, being all about that. You lose against them in battle, but you held your ground the whole time. They'll still respect you for it. They might not necessarily be looking to, work with you anytime soon because you're, still on an opposing side, but you might be able to have a different relationship to them. They might, treat you in a more respectful way as an enemy than, somebody that cut their losses and ran midway through the fight and, was noticed for it. And then I'm hoping that's actually going to play out in the form of kind of tales being told, NPCs talking to one another about deeds, and that's how your reputation spreads. That, maybe it's a letter quest that, somebody delivers a letter from one place to another, and they don't realize that they just sent a letter over that is kind of proclaiming your victories in a specific battle, and that if they don't complete that quest, your reputation isn't even known to that town. I would love to see that sort of like minutia and specificity to the way NPCs communicate and interact in the world. So,
I think on that note, like ogres in general might revere warriors and as a class, and frown upon rogues who are sneaking their way through and backstabbing people instead of going down the front line fighting toe to toe. There might be situations like that where people are reacting to class for sure. I think there will be.
yeah. All right. So before we wrap up, is there any Q&A? Any questions anybody has? We're gonna probably be wrapping this up very quick here because Poro's turning into a zombie rapidly. It appears.
The zombie stretch.
I ended up with a really weird non-schedule, and I have to sleep at weird times, and it just hits me all at once, and I'm like dead.
Damn.
So if I haven't made that much sense recently, that might be why.
Gotcha. What? That is an awesome question, Tanlin. The answer is why. You're not supposed to answer a question with a question, but I did it. Deal with it. Because if we aren't getting any Q&A here, then we might be looking to wrap up a wee bit early. And once again, everybody, next week is the 1-year anniversary episode of Live Feature Rant. Now, this is like literally one plus or minus 1 day to the year of when the first episode aired. This was me just kind of ranting about features I want to see in Landmark, features I want to see in EverQuest Next, and then the next few episodes after that I was kind of talking about some of my giant mega doc concept thingies that I wrote back in late 2013, and those I still need to go back through and repost them because it's a lot of stuff. I wonder how much of it's still even relevant. I should probably check through it again, but I
gotta rewatch to see how many of those features actually made it in.
Yeah, that would be good to know. I should probably do that too. The very first episode, it was just like a page and a half of features that I was just going through and giving explanation on. It was just a rant about features that was being done live.
Yeah, before alpha.
It was.
That's kind of cool.
It definitely was. Definitely, and yeah. So, I'm not really seeing any questions from the community here, so I think we'll start wrapping up, and unless somebody gets something in before we move things along, then this will be that. So, Poro, why don't you start then? Give everybody a little bit of what you're up to and where people can find you and stuff.
What have I been up to? So I'm trying to get a job. That's the main thing I'm up to. That's not really relevant to you guys. I've been building a landmark again. If anybody wants to see what I'm doing, it's on Courage Gully, and it's like right on top of the portal spire thing. I am not much of a builder, but I try stuff every once in a while. And mainly I am on Twitter. I will link that in a little bit. And I say lots of things, and not all of it is probably stuff that you want to hear, but if you are interested in my opinions, then you should go. And I also have a blog recently where I'm going to be writing about some landmark stuff soon, TM. And that's pretty much it.
All right. Diggs, how about you?
I have way too many opinions. You can find them all on the forums. I am spending time in Landmark, actually focusing on newbie progression right now. Just the adventuring has been so much fun. I haven't even really thought about doing any building. I think I'm supposed to maybe do some building this weekend. I mean, so bad that my claim isn't even a shack. It has four chests and my void vault, and that's it. It's just to hold all the loot that I have.
So it's a
No
dirt
floor.
farm.
Yeah, nothing. There's nothing, no structure there. It's just to
Yeah.
hold my chest.
Yeah, without a structure,
Um,
it's a dirt farm with tools. This is
yeah.
going way
And
back
not
to
even
Castles and
tools.
Crapsacks
No,
terminology.
no tools. All the tools I no no
Just your
no
personal storage.
yeah. And but yeah, the adventuring has just been so much fun going through and trying out the different weapons. Uh, and this past weekend, I went through and started finding the ley line crystals, which was kind of cool. Man, uncovering all of those is just time consuming, but
Yeah.
you know, the idea of it is kind of cool. And what else? I'm really stoked for next week. I definitely want to go back through and have watched through your first episode to see how much of that stuff made it through. Hopefully, it will be a very interesting episode in that we should have an update next week, and we should have a Landmark Live that's discussing those updates. So there should be a lot to talk about. I'm kind of excited. Hopefully,
Yeah.
it doesn't get pushed back. Landmark Live, like if the update gets pushed back, then we'll miss it. But
Well, I mean,
should
it's
be a lot of
already
fun.
been pushed back a lot. It's been over a month now since we've gotten updates.
Yeah, I'm just
so-
saying. Hopefully, we'll get it on your 1 year anniversary. We'll have all that stuff to talk about. At least maybe the blueprint will be updated. It could be a phenomenal episode and chock full of content. So.
For sure, for sure. All right, and of course I am Legendary Neurotoxin. If you don't already know who I am, I don't know how you even found your way here. But if you somehow found your way here and are not familiar with what I do and all the shows that I do, stick around. They're just starting to get real good. Dead feature rant, of course, H1Z1 just came out, so there's plenty to talk about. Live feature rant still going strong. It'll be, like I said, 1 year anniversary next week. We've got Theory Forge. That one's also going strong. That's been a lot of fun. And I'll see both of you there on that for sure, because that's another show that Diggs and Poro are on with me here. It's awesome. It's totally fun. And aside from that, content and creations from 1 to 5 p.m. Pacific on Sundays, every Sunday, followed by the Evercast show. We have Tanlin in here. He's one of the regulars there. So that's going to be it. We are going to be bringing this party over to our friends over on the 10 Ton Hammer Network. I don't know if it's Skylatron or Velix who's running things right now, but they're the folks responsible for EQ Hammer and pool parties at SOE Live and various other things. So we like to give them some support. They're lovely folks. So we'll see you all over there. Thank you very much for coming. Diggs, Poro, awesome having you. Everybody in chat, thanks for coming. See you later.